once I start it, and then I will read the official statute, and we can call the meeting to order. Okay. The regular meeting of the Transgender Equity Council will now begin. Good evening, my name is Track, and I am the staffer of the Transgender Equity Council. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota statutes, section 13D.021, due to the declared local health pandemic. The city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. Board meetings are public and subject to the Minnesota open meeting law. We will now call this meeting to order and call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum. And so when I call your name, please just unmute your microphone to say that you are here or sign that you are here. Hunter Williams.
I'm here.
Awesome. Emma Gray.
Here.
Galen Mitchell.
Here.
Casey Pavis.
Here.
Davis Sensman.
Here.
May Brooks.
Here.
Taryn Wood.
Here.
Destiny Zhang.
Here.
Awesome. There are 8 members present, and then Billy, Ash, Becca, Melissa, Nico, and Kenzie are absent. There is a quorum, and with that, we will proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. And Hunter, I know that Kenzie was originally going to lead us through adopting the agenda and minutes. Do you want to lead that or do you want me to?
You're on it. It's
Great,
you.
okay.
All you.
I can take their pieces since they couldn't come today. Just wanted to check. So I'll give a moment for everyone to review today's agenda and the linked minutes from last month, and let us know if you have anything you want added to the agenda or anything that looks incorrect in the minutes. And then when you've reviewed them, we'll need someone to motion to approve and someone to second that motion. And I will put the LIMS agenda in the chat as well. Anyone needs it.
This is Emma. I move to adopt the agenda.
I second. This is Hunter.
Awesome. And I'm just gonna, and is that to adopt the agenda and minutes, just so we only have to vote once?
Yes.
Sweet. Thank you for clarifying the motion. And I'm just gonna call roll on that vote. Hunter.
Yes. All good.
Emma.
Yes.
Galen.
Yes.
Casey.
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
May.
Yes.
Taryn.
Yes.
And Destiny.
Yes.
Wonderful. There are 8 ayes, no nays, and 6 absent. The motion passes and the agenda and minutes are adopted. So we'll move into the first item on the agenda, which is just some quick updates on the Transgender Equity Council recommendations that you all made to City Council in March of 2021. I have linked in the agenda and sent out to you all like a very thorough list of whether there are updates on every single item from those recommendations. I'm not going to summarize all of those right now, but we'll just update you on what has changed since I last sent that document out. So one item is the city is proposing an ordinance that would allow what's called single room occupancy. Essentially people's ability to rent one room, like just a bedroom, in a space with communal bathrooms and kitchens. It had previously only been allowed in the context of like college dorms and things like that, but was not widely allowed. It would provide a much more affordable form of housing. So the city is looking to pass an ordinance that would allow single room occupancy, and due to your work, and then some extended follow-up with different council offices, that ordinance does explicitly strongly encourage, because it's not legally allowed to require, that buildings that are renting in this way have gender neutral restrooms, or if they don't, like allow people to use the restroom they feel most comfortable with. And I'm still in conversation with staff about if there's other ways we can help ensure that that happens beyond just writing it into the ordinance. But the ordinance is set to go before council, I believe, next week, and that language is in the ordinance. So shout out to you all. That is a win.
Wonderful.
The second update is that we spent, I think, a while digging into this in the policy subcommittee meeting, but there was a petition by Minneapolis community members to get a question on the ballot that, if the majority of Minneapolis voters vote yes, would remove the requirement for the city to have a police department and replace it with a Department of Public Safety. City Council has moved the process forward for that question to be on the November ballot. Originally, some city council members had also proposed a very similar charter amendment ballot question. They have removed it since this community petition version is on the ballot, so that there's not two very confusingly similar amendments on the ballot in November. So that has moved forward since I last spoke to you all. The third update I have is around rent control. And I know the policy subcommittee wanted to talk about this more, so we'll get to this more in a minute. But another potential charter amendment that's going to be on the ballot in November is around allowing rent control or rent stabilization, essentially controlling the amount that rent increases can happen from year to year to try to keep rents lower. And the Charter Commission, which is the city board that reviews potential changes to the city charter, essentially the city constitution, is looking at two different paths to rent control. One would put an amendment on the ballot that would be shaped by voters in that case, decided on by voters. The other, it would just be city council figuring out how to enact rent control, which therefore leads to less community input and the question of, I told the policy subcommittee I'd follow up around like what are the potential outcomes of these two different routes to rent control. And essentially what I have heard is that if it's just up to city council and not on the ballot, it might not be as strong of a rent control. It might have more loopholes and be less effective for renters. So we can come back to that in a few minutes when the policy subcommittee reports back. But I know one thing they were considering was whether the TEC wanted to write a letter to council about next steps on what they wanted to see out of rent control. So those are the potential directions rent control could take right now. And I think those are all the updates I have that are new since I last sent that out. So I'll pause there to see if anybody has any questions. I know that was pretty high level.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So I was wondering if we could request what has been done already in relation to rent control, like a history of all of that entails. And really, there's a lot going into that discussion. So I was wondering if that's something that we can get, and then putting it on the ballot in November. I'm just trying to envision what that would look like in order to be voted on November, what needs to happen. So I don't know if that's something that we can gather.
I have a clarification question to your question, Hunter. When you say a history of what's been done, do you mean like what does rent control look like in other cities, or do you mean like what has happened in Minneapolis so far related to rent control?
Well, that is a good question. Both, I would say, if we could, yeah.
Shrek, this is May, and not to be ignorant, but I don't know if I've ever heard of rent control in Minneapolis. Am I just ill-informed?
This is track. No, you're not. So Minneapolis does not have a rent control policy so far. That is why you've not heard of it. And that's part of why I was clarifying your question, Hunter. Like, when I say what has happened so far in Minneapolis, I was referring to like the past few months that got the potential charter amendment to the point it's at now in the council process. I can try to do a little research and get examples of rent control from other cities. I don't know how much capacity I'll have, but I'll do what I can. But currently Minneapolis does not have, to my understanding, any legislation that's controlling rent increases. Does that help answer both of your questions?
This is May. Yes, it did. Thank you.
And this is Hunter. Yes, it did. I was just thinking, if there's anything that happened in the past, historically, if there was any kind of movement towards this. And the amendment is in process. Is that new for the council, or is this kind of just, is this a new precedent to be setting rent in Minneapolis? I'm trying to kind of get a feel for that. I'm trying to envision what it would look like from their perspective.
This is track. I can try to follow up. I don't totally know the answer to that, transparently. I know that because it might go the like ballot question charter amendment route, it is considered a like bigger action than just writing an ordinance, if that makes sense. Changing the city's charter is a bigger project. But I don't know as much about past history. Okay. And my last question, I'm sorry, I have so many questions. My last question is who, one second here, who would be leading this? One second. For the community, who would be leading this? Who's writing the charter amendment? Who's taking this on if it does pass in the ballot or before? Like, who would be leading that movement? This is track. Also, thank you, Taryn. Taryn just put in the chat, and I'll put it in the minutes as well, a link to the city's webpage explaining what's going on, like what rent control is, what is being proposed, where the process is at. So, and some history. Amazing. Thank you so much. My understanding is who in the community is like leading the push on this process right now is a coalition of a ton of different like housing orgs and other organizations. And however, the like language that would go on the ballot has to be written by the city attorney's office because it has to be like legally sound language that doesn't have loopholes when people vote on it. That would be written internally to the city. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? If not, we can move on to subcommittee updates. Do I remember correctly that Emma, you offered to report back from policy?
I did.
Sweet, I will throw it to you then.
All right, I will try my best. Just feel free to fill anything in here that I missed. But so we met on June 28th, last Monday, and we really talked mostly about reflections on the March council recommendations, including a few separate things. So the mayor is in support of piloting universal basic income, a pilot in the Twin Cities, and that could go on to be a bigger project if it gets approved in the 2022 budget. There was a general sense that the recommendations that the TEC put forth were a good amount of content and things that we definitely wanted to focus on. And we also talked about in-person meetings with people at the council, trying to move some things outside of just sending recommendations to the city council, but actually like networking and meeting with people in person. And we weren't really 100% sure where the city was at in regards to people meeting in person outside of, you know, the office, just like grabbing coffee, having conversations, stuff like that. But hopefully that would be something that we could pursue in the future, so that we're not just kind of tied to the city council, but actually like trying to work within the city government to move some things, or at least get more information on things that aren't just city council members that, you know, support this committee. And then we talked about the charter amendment to remove the Minneapolis Police Department. And there are several versions of that. It seems a little convoluted and tricky to maybe explain. And I'm not even 100% sure I understand all of it, because I know that there are potential things going on the ballot, and people are trying to explore several different options as to like how to move forward with either replacing MPD in its entirety, or at least defunding it partially, and how the city can go about, or how the city and, you know, the voters can go about making that happen. Which I'm happy to talk more about if people are interested, or I might actually pass it over to Track if people want to hear more about like that situation, because I think Track, you probably have the best conceptual framework for all of that. Is that something that people would be interested in, like learning a little bit more about, like where that's at currently? And if not, I'm happy to continue moving. So let's see, what else did we talk about?
Oh, this is May. I raised my,
May's is up.
Oh, okay.
that's a yes, just so you know. I didn't want you to
Gotcha.
think, you know, the quiet was, I was ignoring you.
I see. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm reading from the agenda here from our meeting, so I can't see the chat or any of the reactions. Track, do you mind just talking like a little bit about the charter, the
Yeah,
charter amendments, and like the potential changes to the mayor's purview and whatnot?
totally. I'm gonna try to do this in the clearest and most concise way I can. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a community petition to create a ballot question to change the city charter. That is successfully moving forward towards the ballot. It would remove the requirement that the city has a police department, remove the requirement that the city has a certain minimum number of police officers, replace that department with a Department of Public Safety that can have police officers but is not required to. And make that Department of Public Safety report to both council and the mayor, like every other city department currently does, instead of what MPD currently is supposed to do, which is report only to the mayor and not be controlled by the council. There was a council member designed amendment that was very similar to that one. They've removed it now that that one's on the ballot, so as not to cause confusion. So I'm not going to summarize that one. The other amendment that is likely to be on the ballot, or at least maybe on the ballot related to this, the Charter Commission, so that board that oversees edits to the city's charter, is currently trying to propose an amendment that doesn't actually do anything directly with MPD, but would put more things under the control of just the mayor instead of the city council. Essentially would shift the power balance between the mayor and city council and move it much more towards the mayor than it is currently. I have not gotten a very clear answer on what happens if both of these amendments get a majority of votes in November. My understanding is that they explicitly contradict each other because one removes a department and takes its replacement away from the mayor, and the other gives things to the mayor, including MPD, the department that would be removed. So I don't have a clear answer on what happens if both were approved, but those are the two explicitly public safety related and like implicitly in terms of control of departments, public safety related charter amendments that are currently moving forward towards the ballot. I don't have a sense of whether there is any role that city council can have at this point in whether the charter commission amendment, the like give more things to the mayor amendment, makes it onto the ballot or not. If I have a sense that that is something that council gets to make a decision around and that you all could therefore try to influence, I will obviously let you know. Please feel free to ask me follow-up questions. That was my attempt to do it in a relatively simple way, but I know I'm deep in this stuff, and so I don't always explain it well.
I thought you did a really good explanation. This is May. I thought you did a very good explanation.
Thank you.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely
well,
better than I could have explained it.
I just think there's the idea, which is really hard for me to understand, of there's this great idea and the first big deal is we have to put the question on and see if people would actually even answer the question in an affirmative manner. That's the first big deal. And then everything else is just, gee, wouldn't it be great if? Look at all these great options we have if. So I think it is fraught with way too many details. So I do think you did a good job.
Thank you, May. And I guess to explain why it's that process, the only other thing I'll say is the city's charter is essentially like the city's constitution. And so the only ways to change the city's charter are via a majority of votes on the ballot or via all council members and the mayor all voting unanimously for something, to my memory. And so that's why these ideas are moving through the ballot process, even though it is like another step in delaying the timeline.
And so depending on how the election shakes out, even if the ballot measure doesn't pass, if there was a mayor that was elected that supported that and all of city council agreed, then they could change the charter without a ballot measure, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But that would require, yes, all of city council and the mayor.
Right. Okay. Well,
And
thanks.
this, yeah, because this is May. That's pretty much like the proverbial snowball's chance in hell.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. But it does seem like there are some more mayoral candidate that would support that, but maybe not everyone on city council. But anyway, we did talk about that quite a bit. Some other pieces that we did talk about were mandatory training for housing inspectors, because there have been concerns that have come up in the housing inspection portion of the city government, where people have had some bad experiences, and right now there aren't enough inspectors to or not enough funding, I guess, to justify or have the capacity to do those trainings. So TRAC was going to follow up about adding more staff and if that was possible.
Yeah, can I clarify one detail on that, Emma?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's housing inspectors doing mandatory training for landlords.
Right. Thank
So it's
you.
about, yeah. So it's about, we can't make our non-discrimination trainings for landlords mandatory because we don't have enough staff
Right.
to train all the landlords. And so I will follow up and see if if it would make sense for you all to propose more funding so that they could have the staff capacity for that.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Other than that, we kind of looked at national policy, just what some cities are doing in order to kind of gain some ideas for our recommendations for the fall to city council. So we definitely had, some examples from the national stage of what other cities are doing. Looking at decriminalizing sex work, cannabis legalization, universal basic income pilots that are happening in different places. And then there was also some recommendations potentially around a push to invest in a queer and trans community center for the city. And then some more talk around the gay and trans panic defense and different supports within the city on different levels. So just kind of thinking ahead, like what are some things that other cities are doing that we could in turn potentially bring to the city council and say, hey, we think this is a good idea and we would like you to explore this, and we're here to help with that. I think that's it.
Yeah, this is TRAC. The only thing I'll add to that is I kind of summarized the rent control piece already, but I know that part of the conversation that came up in the policy subcommittee meeting was like, is it worth the TEC writing a letter to council or in some other way actively taking a stance on which route towards rent control city council takes? And that would be something you all would need. Like if you wanted to write a letter, you all would need to vote on that in this meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think
This
that's
is
all. That's all
Hunter.
that
Oh,
I apologize. This is Emma. That's all I had.
oh, no worries. That's good. I'm glad you took the time to speak. Thanks, Emma.
Mhm.
So this is Hunter. So as far as writing a letter from us at TEC, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So please go ahead and correct me, Emma or TRAC, if I'm off, by all means. So we're writing this as a recommendation to change rent control, or I just want to make sure that I have an understanding of what it looks like for us. Do we say yes? Do we take this on? I just want to make sure that I know what that looks like for us.
This is TRAC. Totally. Thanks for clarifying. I told the policy subcommittee I would do more research on like what it would take to get to rent control. And what I learned is that the charter amendment ballot route to rent control makes a stronger policy with fewer loopholes than the city council just creates it themselves route. And so what it would probably, it could look like you saying, we want either of those, we just want one of them to happen, or it could look like you saying, we specifically want one or the other route to rent control. Please, please do that. Or obviously, I mean, technically it could look like you saying we don't want rent control, but I know that you have all talked in support of rent control, which is why I summarized it like that.
Okay. Yep. Great. Thank you. That's clear. Appreciate it. So it seems, I mean, like you said, we've talked about this before. I think we're all in favor of it. Obviously, I would be signing a letter, right, for myself if that's what we're going to do, and then have somebody voice over for that. But do we need to, like you said early, or do we need to vote on that, or what does that need to look like? And then does that go into Google Doc? I was just mixing up my words here saying Google Drive, but Google Docs is what I'm talking about. So I just am trying to figure out who's willing to take that on and write it. I don't know if track needs to, if we need to have a motion for that or to have a vote on it. Just trying to see what everybody else thinks, I guess.
From a process perspective, I want to hear other folks' opinions, and then someone would need to motion that you all want to send a letter to city council. Either they would need to say either we want to, like, the TEC is going to send a letter to city council in support of rent control in general, or in support of one of these specific routes to rent control, so you all are clear on what you're voting on. And then if it passed, we would coordinate, and I can help with writing support, but whoever would want to work in a SharePoint doc with me to write that letter. And since that letter would probably need to go before council, they're voting in August, I don't know when, so might need to go before council before your next TEC meeting. This would be the meeting where you would need to vote on that, we're going to send a letter. Yeah, so that would be process, but want to make sure if other folks have questions or reflections that there's space for that too. And then obviously, if everyone wants to, anyone who wants to motion is welcome to go for it.
So this is Davis. So yesterday the Charter Commission said they rejected the resident driven petition, right? So can the city council overrule that, or?
Thank you for being further ahead than I am. I did not make it through the whole Charter Commission minutes. I'm going to double check right now. Okay. My memory is that, great, I just opened a 16-page document. This is not the most efficient route. My memory
This is
that,
Davis. Sorry, I dropped a link to the article from the Star Tribune yesterday in there. Now, I don't know that that's a correct reading of what happened.
Yeah, so I believe that is a correct reading of what happened. My understanding is that okay. I'm trying to skim this. Yeah, the city council does not have to take the charter commission's recommendations, just like the city council does not have to take your recommendations. So if there's a citizen petition, it has to go through the charter commission before it goes to city council, but the city council does not have to follow the charter commission's recommendations. So they could still put the original version of the rent control petition on the ballot.
Okay, great. That was my question.
Yeah.
This is Davis again. That was my question. They can
Totally.
ignore them if they want to.
Yes. Does anyone have any other questions or reflections on this idea? And I guess if no one has any additional questions, and welcome Zaylor, our presenter, who will be presenting to you all later. But if no one has any additional questions, is there anyone who wants to motion for a letter? Obviously, this is not a step you all need to take, but I just want to make sure we don't move on the agenda if somebody wanted to make that motion.
Either works for me. I'm easy either way. Make a motion or move forward. Yeah, it seems I'm not sure as much as I guess as everybody's either feeling really overwhelmed or just thinking maybe we'll tackle this at the next TEC meeting. But I want to make sure we're all on the same page, like you said earlier, Track, is that we're not just moving forward without, you know, having everybody's input. So I don't know if we need to allow more time for this. I know we have Kenzie, our other coach, that's not here right now, but you know, we're open. We're not here to make this as stressful or try to push for anything, but we just want to make sure that we have created space to allow for your opinions and questions, concerns, and just make sure that you're a part of this conversation. All right, Track, let's just move it on then, I guess.
Okay, we can totally move on. And the only thing I will say is I don't think, maybe depending on what the council timing is, but I don't think you all can weigh in on this if you don't weigh in now, because of the timing of when it's going to come before council and the next meeting. So just wanted to clarify that I don't think this is between like motioning to write a letter and holding off to decide on it next month. There's a chance it will be, but it is likely that this is between motioning to write a letter and just not stepping in on it right now, which is totally fine.
This is Davis. I defer to the folks on the policy committee, like the folks who have discussed this maybe, but I mean, I do think that trans folks are far more adversely, you know, are in large portion renters, and certainly are, you know, adversely affected by just kind of willy-nilly astronomical rent increases. So I would think it would make sense for us to write a letter. Now, it might not be the most important thing for like everyone's top priority, but I would certainly, you know, I think there is a connection that could be made. And I don't think it's I mean, I know we haven't had a chance to like dig into the suggestions, but I think what the city council has put forward is pretty reasonable.
This is Emma. I would motion that the Trans Equity Council write a letter to support this rent control amendment.
And this is Davis. I'd second that.
And to clarify before I call roll, knowing that there's the two different rent control options, Emma, were you motioning for like general support of rent control or for one of them in particular?
I think I would motion for general support of rent control in whatever way that can be achieved.
Okay. I can call roll then. Hunter,
Yes, all good.
Emma, I know you just motioned, but so that we have it on
Yes.
record.
Yes.
Galen,
Yes.
Casey,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Taryn,
Yes.
and Destiny.
Yes.
Wonderful. There are 8 in favor, none opposed, 6 absent. The motion passes. Is there anyone who is interested in working, and I will support to draft this letter?
This is Davis. I can help. I can work on it if.
This is Catherine. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
This is Taryn, and I can also assist.
This is Catherine, and I can assist, but I wouldn't want to write the first draft of it.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I will follow up with you next week so that we can make that happen. Are there any other questions on anything from the policy subcommittee? And thank you, Emma, again for reporting back. If not, I know training didn't meet last week, so there aren't any updates from training. And so I will move us on down the agenda. I also don't have updates from the trans issues work group right now, other than that we are still in the process of trying to get trans equity guidelines attached to our contracts with shelters and other social service providers. Still working, has not stopped, waiting for law clerk feedback from the city attorney's office, but I don't have more for you all on that right now. So I will move us down to summit updates. In terms of tabling at the summit, I know that you all are signed up to table at the summit resource fair and do some outreach. Just wanted to leave space if anyone had any questions, suggestions, thoughts on that quickly.
This is Hunter. Okay, sorry, just want to make sure. Okay, so tabling at the summit, I know, you know, kind of with everything that's going on with COVID-19 and all the impact from that, it seems to have settled down. So if there's, I was wondering if there's any more. I know previously it was very strict requirements, limitations, and I know things are starting to lift. And so I don't know if there's any updates on specifics in relations to tabling at the summit. I just wanted to see if anybody had any news on that.
Thank you for asking that. Are Our plan for the summit is still a hybrid of virtual and in-person. So every component will at least have a virtual option. Some will also have an in-person option. We have not yet made a final call yet on which pieces are in person. As you said, a lot of things are reopening. We're also trying to watch the news and recommendations around the Delta variant that is spreading and has caused some changed recommendations around indoor events. So our hope is that it will be possible to have a resource fair that is both virtual and in person, but not promising the in-person part yet. Want to make a call on that closer to, and have not confirmed a venue, so can't answer that question either before it comes up.
Okay, and then I guess my idea for that would be then like a timeline as it gets closer. You know, I know time is flying. It's like 3 weeks left until August. I feel like August in the summer is just ending quickly. So I think, you know, I'm just wondering if it's too much for people like registering, figuring out the face-to-face component. You know, I feel like the time is not on our side right now. So I'm trying to figure out some sort of, 1 second here, having something that can work in parallel of face-to-face and something online. Oh, I was frozen a little bit. Okay. I want to make sure I'm still connected. So something that would kind of work for both is my suggestion. I don't know, you know, how Minneapolis is with everything going on. I think it's so much for people to think about. I don't know if there's something about maybe just trying to do something next year instead, because I feel like this year is just such a back and forth. So if there's something that we can do to keep them both in parallel with each other, so we don't have to really try and make some last minute decisions as it gets closer. And I know it's also hard with interpreters getting close as well. I feel like the timeline is just so short to try and make some of these decisions. And I know for BIPOC and trans communities, there's a lot of events that are coming in hot, essentially. And so I think there's some pressure that everybody is feeling, especially with work and everything. That's kind of my suggestion.
Totally. I appreciate that. Our goal with the commitment to everything being virtual is that we're not going to have to do some like last minute scramble rearranging, that we will add as much in person as we can, and not so last minute that we can't get interpreters or that it's a mess for people. But the goal is no last minute calls. We're sticking with the more conservative option in terms of COVID the whole way along, in the hopes that we don't have to frantically dial anything back. And our virtual resource fair will not just be in Zoom this year, it will be in a virtual reality career fair platform that the city has a subscription to that will hopefully make it more accessible for people.
Okay. All right. And then I was also curious that will that include like YouTube, virtual reality, I know. So is that a Facebook, YouTube platform? I don't know if that's linked to anything, you know, how people are accessing that information as an outsider to the city platform. I just wonder how we can mentally prepare and communicate for people so they aren't day of struggling to figure out how they're seeing stuff. And it's not restricted in terms of that accessibility ahead of time.
Yeah. So things like the keynote will be live streamed on YouTube, but the virtual reality career fair and resource fair will not be on YouTube or Facebook. When in all of our communication, we are telling people what platforms we'll be using, and when they register, they will get very clear instructions on how to use the different platforms, how to log into things, how to access things. So it will be as clear as we can possibly make it with the need to use multiple platforms. Thank you for that.
Okay. And then who's coordinating all of that? I want to make sure I'm kind of involved with that accessibility piece. Oh, track. All right. Okay.
You know how to reach me. I mean, the Summit Planning Committee collectively, but I am your point of contact. You know how to reach me.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
Does anyone else have any other summit questions, either about the TEC tabling or about I know Billy has offered to submit a workshop proposal for you all that's like a panel on how to get civically engaged, whether on a board like the TEC or something else. And so just wanted to create space for a minute if anyone had questions or suggestions on that. I know Billy couldn't make it today, but obviously we can pass them on to her. If not, I will move us on to the second to last. Oh,
Yep. Sorry, one more thing. Oh, sorry, I just took a drink of water. I would say if people are wondering, thinking about getting to volunteer at the summit, I think it's a great way to get out and get engaged as volunteers, to start, help support the summit and all of that. I'm looking forward to it. I'm just encouraging people, if you're thinking about it, just definitely do it. And with that, we can move forward.
Thank you, Hunter. I will move us to talking about tabling at Pride, which is our last thing before we hear our presentation from Zaylor. But you will see linked in the agenda, I've drafted some talking points about the summit. Our table will be a combination of TEC and the summit, so I want you all to have like material for reference if people ask you questions about the summit. I've drafted a very basic resource list. It's by no means comprehensive, but what we discovered when we tabled at Pride 2 years ago is people saw a trans flag and they came up and they were like, my trans kid needs a therapist, like my trans friend needs a support group. And obviously that's not what you all are tabling for. So wanted you to have a couple quick, like, you should really go look for this table in this corner of the park that you could give to people who are going to do that. And then the last document in there is the TEC had drafted, and I just made some quick updates and edits, some like talking points about the TEC. So if people ask you like, how do you join or what do you all do? You all have those as well. And obviously it is always okay to not know the answer to something, to like take someone's info down, follow up with them later, give their info to me, whatever. But I want you all to have resources that'll hopefully make you feel more equipped to answer most of the questions we've historically gotten while tabling anyway. But so wanted to take a little time to talk first of all about like, how do we want to make this tabling as engaging and effective as possible? I know we've drafted some talking points. I believe Melissa is working on like a little handout about what the TEC is, and you all will have a little handout about what the summit is. And then I'm working on some like random city swag, and started brainstorming with Billy, and she's going to work on this weekend some sort of like fun like trivia game or something like that, something engaging for people to participate in, because we learned tabling 2 years ago that just pieces of paper was not engaging and did not get people to engage with the table as much. So that's what we've got so far, and would love to hear folks' thoughts on what's been effective, either when you've tabled at the past or when you've gone to something where there were tables in the past, and what you would want to see the TEC doing. Y'all are quiet tonight. I also just dropped the sign up sheet in the chat. if there is anyone who wants to sign up to table and has missed it. I will also be signing up, but I'm just going to fill in where I'm needed, so have waited to put my name on there. The other question I'll ask, so you at least have 2 questions to consider, and hopefully folks have thoughts on one of them, is, are there any other materials you think we should have at our table that we haven't named so far, or other just like logistical details that we need to coordinate in advance of the 17th and 18th? We are going to have a big banner that says City of Minneapolis Transgender Equity Council and Trans Equity Summit. We are going to have a couple camp chairs for you all to sit in, a table under a tent, swag to hand out, handouts to hand out, hopefully the spinny wheel trivia game, and probably a random trans flag, just so that the table's more fun looking. What are we missing?
This is Hunta. The wheel, is it going to be like prizes for the wheel? You know, swag is swag, right? You know, there's just stuff. It's things that people want, but like prizes for that wheel. You know, it'd be nice to have something of value to give out if they, you know, get the question right.
This is track. We don't have a ton of budget for that, but my hope is that I find like a range of levels of city swag so that we have random stuff we're just giving everybody, and then we have like actually interesting things for people who spin the wheel and answer a trivia question right. I'm gonna go into City Hall next week and just do a lot of digging, but that's the goal. If not, maybe I'll pick up something cheap and random at the dollar store along with the wheel.
Sounds good. Okay. You know, and if anyone makes anything, you know, crafting, maybe sewing, something, you know, something just to like give out at the table, maybe that would work.
How age appropriate does it have to be? This is Catherine.
I don't know the
I make
answer to that
pasties and I've made
question.
ones with flags on them before. I'm happy to donate, but I don't know how many. If the city of Minneapolis wants to pass out nipple covers.
I will
You
try to
can
figure
decide.
out. Yeah, I will try to figure out who I have to ask that question to. And I'll report back if I even figure that out.
I can put tassels on them too, so that's usually a selling point.
And this is Hunta. I mean, Pride's a pretty open, inclusive, you know, space. So if a lot of people are coming in, you know, I feel like we can't control the people that are visiting our table, but representing the TEC group track, that's, I feel like, a decision that you will have to make and ask that question.
I'm not going to be offended at all if you say no. You can say no right away. I totally expect it.
I mean, yeah, no, I will figure it out. I'm not going to be the one to call no on nipple pasties as a table prize.
All right, so it seems like it's time to move forward, or unless there's any more questions before we introduce the presenter. I'm not seeing any more questions, so wonderful. And if there's any other ideas that come up, you know, shoot a text, shoot an email right away. So I will go ahead and introduce Zaylor from Twin Cities Quorum. The presentation is really in relation to LGBTQIA plus business owners and how they can register their businesses. So I'm happy to introduce Zaylor. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, name, pronoun, and we'll go ahead and listen to your presentation.
You are still on mute.
It's been a long day. Thanks so much for the intro, Hunter. My name is Zaylor, Zaylore. I'm a board member for Twin Cities Quorum. I'm the founder of my own law firm, Zaylor Stout and Associates. I'm a former board member for Reclaim. So I recognize some names on the list over here. Some of my favorite people are here. So I always love that. I use he, him pronouns and have some great information to share with you. So let me see if I can get this PowerPoint up. I don't use this platform as much as I do Zoom, so bear with me. Okay, hopefully people can see this. Can I get up? Whoop whoop, if you can see me, if you can see the presentation, it should say the business of inclusion. Awesome.
Yep. And
Right.
Hunter, let us know when you've got the interpreter pinned again.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so I have the interpreter pinned right now. You can go ahead and share, but anytime you reference something, if you could just give me a moment so I can click it to pull it up and then look at it and then go ahead. So if there's anything that you're referencing specifically, just let me know so I can look at that.
Okay, no problem. Thanks again for having me tonight. Rebecca Wagner, who is the executive director for Twin Cities Quorum, was supposed to be here as well with me today, but she's out of town for a family emergency, and so you have me. But one of the reasons why I'm excited to be here is one of the main reasons I joined Quorum was actually to help Rebecca get across the finish line this supplier diversity effort that she's been working on for a number of years now. And so you might have, some of this may be a bit of a recap for you in regard to supplier diversity, but I want to make sure that I'm not assuming that there's a certain level of knowledge that folks have as it relates to this, because I know I didn't know much about it before attending my first conference 5 years ago now. Trying to get the PowerPoint to move forward, and it doesn't. Oh, here we go. Of course, then it goes. So, who is Quorum? Quorum is the Minnesota LGBTQ plus and Allied Chamber of Commerce. We are affiliated with the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce. A few years ago, we received the Rising Star Chamber Award, which is bestowed on, chambers that have had either a renaissance or are doing more amazing work than they had done previously. We're pretty active. We're one of the more active chambers in the country. We do over 60 events each year. Virtually all the events are free. I think they only have like 3 events where there is a fee associated with it. And our focus is in regards to building community within LGBTQ plus business owners and creating additional opportunities for those businesses as well. And we'll spend a little bit more time talking about that. A quick background on my firm as well. My firm has 3 certifications. So we're LGBT certified, we're disabled owned certified, as well as minority owned certified. And so we'll be talking about some of these different requirements as it relates to that. But NGLCC, which is the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, is the national governing organization that does certifications for LGBT-owned businesses. Their process is as rigorous as women, as their counterparts that certify women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, disabled-owned businesses, as well as veteran-owned businesses. The more established ones are the women and minority certified businesses. The three are kind of on the same level in regards to their tenure within the industry. Ours, I would say, would be the third as it relates to that. There's all kinds of great events as it relates to the national as well as the local affiliate chambers. In order to be able to register and get certified as an LGBTQ plus business, it needs to be 51% or more LGBT owned. You have to be a citizen or lawful permanent resident. Your headquarters have to be here in the United States. And my memory serves me correct. You have to be in business for either 2 or 3 years. So there has to be some track record that you have in regards to being in business. The Quorum Board is made up of 16 members currently, and we're a pretty diverse board. We have transgender members, we have members of the corporate community, the nonprofit community, small businesses, women, of course, and Black and Brown individuals. So we try to make sure that we are as diverse as the community that we're representing, and we're doing additional work as well to make sure that we're doing the best that we can in regards to diversifying our membership. And so this year we have a partnership that we did with the with P Fund in regards to I'm checking and making sure I'm not going too fast for the interpreter. Scholarship opportunities for them to be quorum members, so they don't have to pay for your quorum membership for the year, as well as additional support for those Black and Brown businesses, especially in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder.
And Saylor, this is one of the interpreters. You're doing just fine. Keep at your pace, and we'll keep up.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So with the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, I won't spend too much time talking about the details in regards to that. And I can provide the slide deck later on as well, because I know that there's lots of writing and lots of information in here, but I'm giving you the most important highlights, especially as it relates to our discussion today, and what it is that, how it is that you can help in regards to the effort that we're moving forward here with. So diversity and inclusion, I'm sure you all are aware in regards to the, what it's all about, but in the supplier diversity context, what we found is that that there's lots of money being spent by companies as well as municipalities, and a lot of those dollars are being spent with businesses that are not diverse owned, right? And so I have some data in regards to the Minneapolis demographics from the 2020 census, so fresh off the presses. And what we found is that, that there's definitely disparities in regards to minority-owned businesses being able to secure some of these contracts. And so it's trying to even the playing field or provide additional opportunities and support for some of these diverse businesses to secure some of these contracts. And for us, it's important because, the LGBTQ community already have employment challenges, unfortunately, because of, inherent discrimination or unconscious bias that are present. And as you go down the letters from GLBTQ, it becomes more and more challenging, unfortunately, to be able to secure a career, to secure work. And so what we found is providing, hopefully, opportunities for members of our community to be able to start businesses and then hopefully be able to secure contracts with either corporations or municipalities will make it such that they are able to provide a living for themselves and then hopefully also create jobs for other individuals within our community. And so the current effort that I'm working on with Rebecca is getting the city of Minneapolis, the city of St. Paul, and then the state of Minnesota to broaden how they define supplier diversity from not just being women-owned businesses as well as minority-owned businesses, and broaden that out to also include LGBT-owned businesses, disabled-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses. And so our current effort is working with, meeting with officials. And so here in Minneapolis, we've met with Kristen Kendrick, Frank Reed, and Andrea Jenkins thus far in regards to this effort and trying to get the city of Minneapolis to come on board as it relates to broadening out the definition of supplier diversity to include these additional 3 areas. In St. Paul, we met with Valerie Jensen, Dave Gorsick, and Andrea Ledger. And we've also had meetings with the state of Minnesota, and that would be with Alice Roberts Davis and Betsy Hayes. And so, out of the 3, it seems like St. Paul is already an implied yes, and it's just working through the motions in regards to making that happen. I am a resident of Minneapolis, so I'd rather Minneapolis beat St. Paul to the punch as it relates to this. And so, of course, I'm biased and would want Minneapolis to come through first as it relates to that. And so supplier diversity really deals with the intentional inclusion of sociological and or economically disadvantaged groups into the procurement process. And so, one of the examples that I can give for me and my business is I'm triple certified, so I'm already in the process. I've gotten secured contracts through the Metropolitan Council, for example. And so this advocacy effort isn't something that's going to benefit me personally. But I know members of our community that have challenges in regards to sometimes not being fully accepted by some of the other diverse organizations. So for example, WeBank, WBENC, is the national certifying body for women-owned businesses. And so in my research and digging, I found that WeBank doesn't include trans women as part of their supply diversity program. There's works and talks about that kind of stuff, but it makes it challenging then for trans women to be able to go and secure certification through that entity if it's not necessarily something that's available. And then let's say that the trans woman happens to be a trans woman of color as well. Some folks would say, well, why doesn't she go and get certified through the minority certifying body, which is NMSDC? Well, sometimes, it's you don't necessarily feel welcome in those spaces either. And so why should somebody have to pick and choose which aspect of their identity they need to use to be able to have access to a supplier diversity program? And so that's part of the argument that I'm bringing to the table as it relates to this, that people should be able to use any aspect as well as the most important or the most comfortable aspect of their identity to be able to have access to some of these procurement programs. And to be very, very straightforward and blunt, some of these contracting opportunities could be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, where an RFP may not necessarily be something that's necessary for them to fill out to be able to have access to it, especially if it's a restaurant or hospitality or a professional service. But $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 contract could make a huge difference in regards to a small trans-owned or minority-owned or women-owned business in regards to their viability and their success. So NGLCC is the certifying body for LGBT-owned businesses. The certification process is as rigorous as the certification for women and minority-owned businesses. That's a question that comes up a lot. It meets those national standards as well. That there's many corporations that are involved and accept the certification of NGLCC. And so many of those businesses are corporate headquartered here as well, such as Best Buy, US Bank, Wells Fargo, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Target, and many, many others. I'm sure I'm missing Land O'Lakes. I mean, there's just a long list. And so, the private space has gone far ahead as it relates to supplier diversity and including diverse-owned businesses, including minority, including veteran-owned, LGBT-owned, as well as disabled-owned businesses. And so it's municipalities that are struggling, I think, in regards to catching up. And so with supplier diversity, there's different levels and different tiers where different businesses are. So what I would say is, up here you have, your corporation or municipality that has the money to be able to buy to buy services, products and services. Your tier one contract is your large suppliers, right? Those are your large contractors. So let's say that there's, Minneapolis is looking to build a new building. There's going to be like the Mortensons and all those giant, construction companies that are going to be the tier one contractors. But they have the ability to then use tier two or even tier three contractors, which are smaller, that tend to be more diverse than some of these larger first tiers, to be able to provide access and opportunity to the procurement process. And so there have been municipalities that have leveraged that situation to require these tier one suppliers to use diverse, tier two and tier three companies as it relates to their supplier diversity programs. So the prime example that I have in regards to this is, for my firm, we put in for an RFP for a eminent domain contract for the new bus line that's going to be in St. Paul. And the Metropolitan Council was involved and responsible for that particular contract. They required that diverse businesses be involved in that process. And those larger tier one law firms that have lots of experience in this area, who submitted proposals without including a diverse business, they sent them back and said, you can do better. And so my firm ended up getting a bunch of calls from a lot of these larger firms saying, hey, we noticed that you're one of three disadvantaged business enterprise law firms that's registered with the state of Minnesota. Do you want to go in on with us on this particular RFP? Well, I had already created a relationship with another firm, and we put in our proposal together. And so we were able to get that business. But it's kind of that intentionality as it relates to it that can provide, additional access for smaller firms like mine to be able to get additional knowledge and experience in these areas, so that we can start competing if we're a third tier with these second tier contractors, and then hopefully eventually being a second tier competing for those first tier contracts, which is the main bigger contracts that are out there. All right, quick overview in regard to the impact of the LGBT community in business. Here's some data in regards to why LGBT inclusion is good for business. You have allies. 64% of allies are saying that they're more likely to spend money with businesses and brands that they perceive to be more LGBT inclusive. And consumers are saying the same thing. 85% of allies, 65% of Americans. This is old data. NGLCC had tracked, I think this was at least 2 to 3 years old, that LGBTQ certified businesses contribute $1.7 trillion to the US economy, creating jobs, which is here on the next slide as well. Again, old data here, because I know that there are over 11 or 1,200 certified LGBT businesses nationally now. But 33,000 jobs, right? So I mean, it's a job creator. And who's going to be better at employing more folks from our community than LGBT-owned businesses? So there's that opportunity there as well. Here's some examples of some of the other cities around the country that have expanded their supplier diversity program to include LGBT businesses. Houston, Texas, Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville, New York, Miami, and this is only a snapshot in regards to these. So you'll see some of these are, you would presume, are more progressive cities. Some of these are like, wait a minute, Nashville beat us, right? Louisville, Kentucky beat us? Yes, right? And so, I mean, Minnesota, especially since I wrote an LGBT history book, has so much rich history in regards to being the first. Minneapolis was the first city to come up with a non-discrimination ordinance for LGBT folks in employment based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And then Minnesota, the state, became the first state to do that as well. But this is an area where we're falling behind and need to catch up, right? Because our corporations and our citizenry here, are on board in regards to it. And we just need to make sure that our municipal supplier diversity program is also on board. So almost done. The disparity study that came out in 2017, I always think it's important to highlight this because quorum was at the table as it relates to this discussion, right? And whether LGBT businesses would be included in this disparity study. and there was a concerted effort not to include us in this disparity study. And then the fact that we were not included in the disparity study was used as an excuse for not moving forward in regards to including LGBT businesses in the supplier diversity programs, because they would come back and say, well, we don't have data that can prove that that there's any inherent bias or inherent challenges that members of the LGBT community face in regards to starting a business, growing a business, and the like. And so it was this like wait your turn kind of a situation. So you know, and the census data for Minneapolis for 2020 shows that I think it was like 64% of the population in Minneapolis is white. Well, I can assure you that 32% of the money that's spent by the city of Minneapolis isn't spent with minority businesses. So there's a huge gap, and there's lots of work that can be done as it relates to the supply diversity program. A lot of unfortunately, one of the other aspects that we learned from this disparity study is that the majority of the businesses that received, quote, diverse businesses that received contracts was actually businesses that were owned by white women. And so once you went to everybody else, it was a very small fraction of availability. So, you know, we can't just throw the term out. And I know that I've been saying diverse and minority-owned businesses. Unfortunately, that's the language that's used in the supplier diversity field. And so it's important for me to make sure that I'm mirroring the language that the legislation has and the statutes have as it relates to this. But there's much more diversity out there than just white women, right? And so there's work that can be done in regards to providing broader access for everybody in regards to this. So Quorum is coalition building. So we've just secured a great partnership with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, and they're absolutely on board in regards to helping us advocate for the inclusion of LGBT, disabled-owned, and veteran-owned businesses in the supplier diversity programs. The Minnesota Twins is helping us build this coalition to also include the Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Hmong chambers. So our goal is actually within the next couple of weeks to have a letter signed by all the leaders of all these different entities indicating their support for the city of Minneapolis, the city of St. Paul, and the state of Minnesota to broaden their supplier diversity programs to include these additional businesses that are not currently included. So that's what I have for you. Hopefully that was a good overview. Let me see if I can figure out how to stop sharing. All right. There we go. And so I wanted to make sure that I opened it up to any questions that you might have as it relates to this.
Hi, this is Catherine. I had a question. I know a lot of us in the queer community are sometimes performers and artists and business owners of more adult themed kind of content. And are those businesses welcome in the quorum too?
Absolutely. Everybody's welcome in
Fantastic.
quorum. And so the thing with quorum is there is this focus to be able to provide additional access to both corporate as well as municipal opportunities, but there's always B2B business opportunities that happen as well, which is business to business opportunities, as well as, the mentoring that can happen and the sharing of knowledge and information in regards to, growing your business and things like that. I mean, I get so much knowledge and information from attending quorum breakfasts or networking events. We have quarterly events that happen at our corporate clients where it's much more of a lecture kind of educational scenario, but everybody's welcome in quorum. And so we want you to come and join us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think Hunter had some questions.
This is Hunter.
Well, I saw you. I think you had some questions.
Yes. So I was wondering, do you, I think Track posted a link in the chat. So how do you become a member of Quorum? You know, is it open to membership? Any membership? Is there specific, specific criteria? Is there any fees that are associated with membership? And for example, for some sort of event, how do we go about requesting interpreters? How is that covered? Accessibility, etc.
Yep. So if my memory serves me correct, the Quorum membership is like $20 a month. And if folks have challenges making the $20, membership fee, we have abilities for people to be able to, I think, do it on the sliding scale. See, this is the stuff that Rebecca would know all the answers to, as opposed to me. But the thing is anybody that shows up to a Quorum event, you're not gonna be turned away, right? And so, majority of our events are there's like I think Thrive Thursday breakfasts that happen. So some folks like going up really early in the morning, which is not me. Some folks like doing, networking events that are happy hours in the evening. And so there's a great mix of events to be able to work with whatever people like. And again, majority of those events are free. So we don't check people's, membership cards to see whether they're a Quorum member when they show up or not. It's kind of on the honor system, but we just want people to be able to get together and be able to support each other. The events that are the paid events are our National Coming Out Day Luncheon, which, if my memory serves me correct, is the largest in the Midwest. Is the Quorum Leadership Awards, and then the Ungala. So those are I think the only 3 events that we do that are paid. Everything else is free because we want to make sure that people have access to be able to attend.
Wonderful. And then are those events, I'm trying to, maybe Track can help out with, I'm trying to make sure, like, if interpreters are provided, if somebody is interested from the deaf or hard of hearing community to come in and need a interpreter, I don't know if you work in coordination with City of Minneapolis to provide interpreters. Track, please correct me if you know the information. I had another train of thought, but I have lost it on that question. But yeah, that's my question.
No, that was the second part of your question. My apologies for missing it. So I don't know what the current setup is, but I can get that answer for you because I know Rebecca, who's our executive director, is responsible for all that fun stuff. And so I know once we went virtual, I believe we've had some of our, especially some of our larger, had interpreters. But I don't believe we have interpreters at all events. And so perhaps Rebecca I'll connect Rebecca with Track to be able to figure out, what options and opportunities there are through the city so that we make it more accessible for folks. Where I'm all about all of that. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, and this is Track. I don't think I can. Oh, I'm echoing out of someone's computer. I don't think I can book city interpreters for you all, but I'm always happy to make a connection or help with logistics, or anything like that if that's useful. And thanks to Hunta's significant support of me, have gotten connected to a bunch of local interpreters who do queer and trans events.
Even
which
better.
Hunter gets all the credit for. So always happy to help if that's useful.
Absolutely. So are there other questions? Yes.
It looks, I'm actually just gonna head out here. I was wondering if Track can take over just for the end of it.
Yep, totally. Thank you for being here, Hunter. I know you have to leave a little early.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, no, thank you. Love to all of you. Glad we have the interpreters here tonight. Have a good one. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you. One quick question I will ask is, my understanding in reaching out to you all to schedule was partially just that it's useful for the TEC to know about this, that this is something you're working on. I don't know if you have a sense of like what the Transgender Equity Council does generally is make recommendations to the mayor and city council. I don't know if you have a sense of like what is most useful from the TEC if they wanted to move forward with supporting any of this initiative that you're working on.
No, that's a great question. So it's, you have a direct connection to the mayor, and I know that the mayor has expressed interest in regard to this, as well as several city council members. And so sometimes it's hearing that support from different members within our community, and as well as different organizations in regards to the importance of this, especially since your group is specifically focused on the trans community. I think it could be significantly helpful for the trans community, especially since, again, my experience has been, our transgender and gender nonconforming siblings are the ones that sometimes have the most difficult challenges securing and maintaining work, based on them not following society, conforming to societal norms, right? And so having the ability for them to be able to start their own businesses and be able to work for themselves can create some of that important financial stability and independence that I think has been lacking, not due to any fault of their own. So I just think having when you have meetings, bringing it up to them, asking them where they're at as it relates to it, bringing up the fact that some of these other more conservative cities are ahead of us in regards to this, and asking why we haven't made this a priority. It's not that challenging. It doesn't appear as though it would be that challenging for the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul to make this change. The state of Minnesota is going to be a little bit more of a challenge, because I think there's going to have to be legislation that has to be passed. And so that would require both chambers to agree on things, which is really hard to make happen. But if we can make this happen for Minneapolis and St. Paul, I mean, again, the bulk of the state's population is here, as well as the bulk of the state's LGBTQ population is here as well.
Sweet, that answered my question. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
There's no way I answered everybody's questions.
I actually have one more question that I will ask. I know that when I spoke to Councilmember Cunningham about this and he suggested bringing you in, one of the things he named is that part of the pushback against incorporating LGBT-owned businesses into like the supplier diversity was the kind of like, well, now it's just going to be like cis white gay men instead of cis white women who are getting all the contracts, instead of maybe like BIPOC-owned businesses. And I don't know if you all have had that conversation or have thoughts on like how that conversation has gone for you all.
Yeah, that's a very common that's a common pushback as it relates to that, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing the coalition building aspect, because there's this a lot of times people like just talking about pie, right? And it's like, oh well, if you get a bigger piece of the pie, I get a smaller piece of the pie. And so one of the things, and that's why I brought up the demographic aspect of it, because if we're looking at the city of Minneapolis and we're looking at being equitable and fair as it relates to that, if 65% of the city's population is Caucasian, why are they getting 95% of the contracts, right? And so there's that aspect in regards to some of the disparities that there has to be intentional work in order to be able to do it and address it. And the other aspect is that there's actually cisgender white men in other supplier diversity angles and aspects too. So they're part of the veteran owned, they're part of the disabled owned, right? And so, but does that mean that they're any less disadvantaged sometimes in regards to things? If you have a disability, you're challenged, right? And there's challenges in regards to access, you know, and so the bulk of so I mean that's kind of the argument that I've heard a lot, and so that's also why I brought up the particular example of, you know, somebody that identifies, has multiple identities and multiple aspects of their identities and the intersectionality aspect of it. So why would a, you know, Black trans woman be required to, they can't go to WeBank, they can't get women certified because they don't accept that. Why should she have to go to NMSDC, which is the minority one, which, you know, they may not necessarily feel as comfortable interacting in those spaces, right? Why shouldn't they be able to use their LGBT identity where they feel most at home in regards to who it is that they are, to be able to have access, and not being included precludes them from having that access. And again, these are the folks that are the most marginalized. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful.
Totally. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? If not, I have contact info for both Zaylor and Rebecca, if it's something, Zaylor, that you can't answer. So if questions come up later, or if there's something you'd rather ask directly, please feel free to follow up with me and I can connect you or pass things on. But thank you so much for coming and presenting tonight.
Of course, thank you so much for having us. Yeah, we're here to help, and we'd love all the help and support that we can get from your group and others. So thanks again.
Totally. And that is all we have on the agenda. So can I have a motion from someone to adjourn?
So moved. This is Galen. I move to adjourn.
Perfect. And a second?
No. I second that motion. No.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. I am turning off the recording and hope everyone